When Myles Garrett speaks, the NFL listens. And this time, the Cleveland Browns superstar has sent shockwaves across the league after publicly choosing Shedeur Sanders over Dillon Gabriel when discussing the next generation of NFL quarterbacks. What started as a simple interview question quickly turned into one of the most heated debates of the offseason. Garrett didn't back down, didn't sugarcoat anything, and didn't seem concerned about how fans or players might react. Instead, he leaned into his reputation for blunt honesty and gave the football world exactly the kind of headline it never saw coming. What made the moment even more striking was the context. Garrett wasn't talking to a friendly podcast host, nor was this a casual locker room conversation accidentally caught on camera. This was a media session surrounded by reporters, microphones, and cameras, with every word destined for national broadcast. When Garrett was asked which rising quarterback he believed had the most upside heading into the next NFL cycle, he paused, gave a small grin, and said, "Shedeur Sanders. No question. I'd take him over Dillon Gabriel any day." Immediately, the room reacted. Reporters leaned forward. Phones went up. You could practically feel the air change. Garrett's confidence wasn't the surprising part. He's always been certain in his views. But the choice itself sparked instant controversy. Gabriel has long been considered one of college football's most polished passers, known for efficiency, maturity, and precision. Shedeur Sanders, meanwhile, has been placed under a massive national microscope due to his father, Dillon Sanders, and the spotlight on Colorado football. Some saw Garrett's comment as a vote of confidence in raw talent and high ceiling. Others saw it as disrespect toward Gabriel, who has built a reputation through years of high-level consistency. And with the NFL draft looming, quarterback evaluations already heated, and front offices quietly building their boards, Garrett's opinion carried more weight than most. A defensive superstar publicly choosing one rising quarterback over another. That was going to create headlines, whether he intended it or not. But where things took a turn was inside the Browns facility. Reports quickly began circulating that some teammates were confused, annoyed, or even frustrated by Garrett's blunt assessment. Not because they disagreed about Shedeur or Gabriel, but because they felt Garrett had opened a door the team didn't need opened. Young quarterbacks on their own roster reportedly took the comment personally, even though Garrett never mentioned them directly. A few players allegedly felt the star defender was looking too far ahead instead of supporting the quarterbacks that Cleveland already had. As with anything involving Garrett, the narrative grew louder. Analysts debated whether his comments were harmless or if they exposed underlying tensions. Fans argued over whether Garrett was right or whether he had stepped out of line. Regardless of opinion, one thing became undeniable. Myles Garrett had just ignited one of the most unexpected storylines of the offseason. And the NFL wasn't ready to let it go. Myles Garrett doesn't speak without intention, so when he backed Shedeur Sanders over Dillon Gabriel, it wasn't a random hot take. There was calculation behind it, thought, observation, and a clear sense that Garrett had been paying attention to more than highlight reels. What surprised fans and analysts wasn't necessarily the choice, it was the conviction and the tone he used when making it. It sounded less like an opinion and more like a prediction. Garrett began by praising Shedeur's composure under pressure. And if there's anything a defensive superstar understands intimately, it's what quarterbacks look like when they're under real physical stress. Garrett has spent years chasing down some of the best passers in the world. He knows their tendencies, their weaknesses, their breaking points. And in Shedeur, he sees something that's difficult to coach: calmness paired with aggression. He highlighted Shedeur's ability to extend plays, his poise when the pocket collapses, and his willingness to stand tall even when defenders are closing in. According to Garrett, that is the difference between a good college quarterback and a successful NFL one. And to him, Shedeur has that intangible quality Drake May calls unshakable confidence. Garrett went even further, suggesting that Shedeur's football IQ is significantly underestimated because public attention is focused more on Colorado's shortcomings than on Shedeur's individual growth and production. What Garrett didn't emphasize publicly, but insiders believe influenced his opinion, is Shedeur's resilience. Throughout the college season, he played behind one of the most pressured offensive lines in the country. He absorbed hits, dealt with collapses, fought through injuries, and still produced high-level numbers. To Garrett, that may have signaled that Shedeur has already experienced a taste of NFL adversity and survived it. Dillon Gabriel, by contrast, is viewed as polished, reliable, and mechanically sound. But some scouts believe he has already reached or is close to his developmental ceiling. His numbers are strong, his command solid, and his leadership unquestioned. Still, critics argue that Gabriel benefits from clean systems, structured schemes, and supportive offensive designs that highlight his strengths while masking his limitations. For Garrett, it seems to come down to this: ceiling over security. In Shedeur, he sees a quarterback who could become exceptional with the right coaching. In Gabriel, he sees someone who is already excellent but perhaps less likely to take the next leap into stardom. This distinction may seem subtle, but for NFL evaluators, it's everything. Quarterbacks dictate the future of a franchise. A good one stabilizes a team. A great one transforms it. And Garrett appears convinced Shedeur has the potential to be transformative. But this perspective triggered something unexpected, a locker room response not even Garrett anticipated. The moment Myles Garrett's quote hit the internet, the story didn't simply trend, it detonated. Within minutes, major sports networks were discussing it live on air. ESPN analysts debated the implications. NFL insiders tweeted breakdowns. Talk shows clipped the moment and replayed it again and again, framing it as a full-scale quarterback controversy. Even though Garrett had only answered a simple question. But in the NFL media ecosystem, simplicity rarely survives. Garrett's comment became a headline generator. TV crawlers labeled it as a shocking QB take. Radio shows dissected every word. Social media exploded with highlight comparisons between Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel, many taken out of context. And as the traffic surged, the narrative twisted into something far bigger than Garrett likely intended. Some analysts framed Garrett's remarks as a bold prediction, the kind of forward-thinking insight you'd expect from a defensive superstar who understands quarterbacks better than most. Others called it reckless, arguing that Garrett unnecessarily inserted himself into draft discourse with opinions that could destabilize a locker room. Even former players chimed in, some agreeing with him, others insisting that Gabriel is easily the more NFL-ready quarterback at this stage. But what made the reaction so explosive was the underlying storyline. Shedeur Sanders is the most polarizing college quarterback in the country. Every evaluation of Shedeur comes entangled with conversations about Deion Sanders, media spotlight, hype, critics, fans, and the growing pressure placed on Colorado football. So when Garrett publicly backed Shedeur, it fed directly into a much larger narrative, one the media eagerly amplified. And then came the fan reaction. Colorado fans celebrated Garrett's endorsement, calling it validation. Oklahoma fans and supporters of Dillon Gabriel pushed back, accusing Garrett of overlooking consistency in favor of hype. The debate took over football Twitter for days, with fans posting side-by-side charts, throwing around stats, advanced metrics, and full-season breakdowns. Before long, the conversation transitioned from simple QB comparison to broader themes: race, media favoritism, draft bias, the future of the position, and the evolution of modern quarterbacks. Garrett's quote became the spark for dozens of conversations he never intended to start. He had become the storyline. And while the national media fed off the controversy, the Browns' PR staff found themselves firefighting a situation that didn't originate in the building but grew into something that touched it nonetheless. Coaches reminded the team to keep the focus internal. Players avoided the topic in interviews. Garrett himself stayed quiet, refusing to add more fuel. But by then, the debate had taken on a life of its own. The NFL world wasn't just reacting, it was dividing itself into factions. And all because one of the league's brightest superstars spoke his mind with complete honesty. Yet the biggest impact wouldn't be felt in the media. It would be felt inside the Browns' locker room next. Inside an NFL locker room, the smallest comment can ripple in unexpected ways. And Myles Garrett's endorsement of Shedeur Sanders over Dillon Gabriel did more than ripple. It caused subtle waves that coaching staff immediately felt. Not because players disagreed about the quarterbacks, but because the comment unintentionally touched on one of the most sensitive topics in football: quarterback confidence, and team trust. According to team insiders, the reaction wasn't explosive. No shouting matches, no confrontations. It was quieter than that, which in NFL culture can be more telling. Players exchanged looks, brief comments, short questions. A few wide receivers wondered privately whether Garrett was implying the offense needed a long-term solution at quarterback. Backup QBs didn't express anger, but they definitely noticed the quotes and wondered what they meant. Some players simply didn't understand why Garrett answered the question so openly. One reportedly said, "We're trying to build a season here. Why create storylines we don't need?" Another player defended Garrett, saying he simply answered honestly, and honesty shouldn't be controversial. But even those who defended him acknowledged the complications. When a team leader speaks, his opinions carry weight, even when he doesn't intend them to. Coaches addressed the situation during team meetings, urging everyone to ignore outside noise. They reassured quarterbacks that nothing had changed internally. They reminded players that the focus was on building chemistry, not comparing college prospects. Yet it was clear that Garrett's comment had momentarily shifted locker room energy. Players began tiptoeing around the subject. Reporters asked about it constantly, which only annoyed the team further. The Browns didn't want to deal with quarterback drama. They already had enough battles to fight on the field. Internally, Garrett approached the situation calmly. He didn't apologize because he didn't feel his comment was harmful, but he clarified privately to teammates that he had zero intention of disrespecting anyone. He also emphasized that his evaluation was about raw talent, not about the situation in Cleveland. That clarification went a long way. Garrett's character and leadership earned respect long ago, so most players accepted his explanation. But the incident reminded everyone of reality. When a superstar speaks, the NFL listens, and sometimes the locker room does too, even when it doesn't want to. Still, as the Browns moved forward, a new storyline began emerging. Analysts weren't just debating Garrett's opinion anymore. They were wondering whether his comment exposed something deeper about the team's long-term quarterback vision, and that led to questions that resonated far beyond Cleveland. Garrett didn't intend to create a war over quarterback philosophy, but his comment opened the door to one of the league's most important conversations. What defines a franchise quarterback in today's NFL? When analysts revisited Garrett's quotes, they noticed a pattern. Garrett emphasized traits like composure and chaos, play extension, internal clock, and mental toughness, qualities often associated with quarterbacks who thrive under pressure rather than those who rely on system structure and mechanical discipline. That distinction put Shedeur Sanders in a favorable light and raised questions about where Dillon Gabriel fits in the modern landscape. This wasn't just about two players. It was about competing visions of the position. NFL evaluators are already split into two camps. The traditionalists prefer quarterbacks who master playbooks, operate cleanly inside structure, and minimize risk, the kind Dillon Gabriel represents. The innovators prioritize improvisation, mobility, pocket manipulation, unteachable instincts, and clutch resilience, qualities associated with players like Shedeur. Garrett's endorsement wasn't just an opinion, it was a symbol of where the league might be heading. Defensive stars like Garrett know firsthand which quarterbacks create the most problems. It's rarely the most polished. It's the most unpredictable. The players who refuse to die in collapsing pockets. The players who convert broken plays into touchdowns. The players who aren't rattled by pressure because they live in it. Garrett sees that in Shedeur Sanders. And his comment, intentionally or not, suggested that the NFL's future might lean in that direction. But the draft community wasn't united. Some scouts argued that Shedeur still needs refinement, while Gabriel arrives ready to step in. Others insisted that Shedeur has more star power, leadership magnetism, and growth potential, traits you can't coach. The debate became so intense that front offices reportedly discussed Garrett's take internally. Not because they draft based on his opinion, but because his evaluation shined a spotlight on the philosophical divide between teams. Meanwhile, fans continued battling online, each side using Garrett as validation. All of this attention turned Garrett into an unexpected voice in draft debates, a defender influencing quarterback discussions in a league that usually keeps those evaluations tightly guarded. Through all the noise, one reality became obvious. The NFL is shifting. The quarterback position is evolving. And Garrett's endorsement simply sped up the conversation. As the offseason heated up, there was only one thing left for Garrett to do: address the narrative one final time. After weeks of headlines, debates, locker room whispers, and media narratives, Myles Garrett finally addressed the situation with full clarity. Standing before reporters, he delivered a calm but firm explanation that immediately shifted the tone around the controversy. Garrett made it clear he never intended to insult Dillon Gabriel or undermine any quarterback, college or professional. He explained that when asked the question, he simply answered with honesty, not strategy. He acknowledged that players, media, and fans might read deeper meaning into his comments, but he reinforced that his belief in Shedeur Sanders' upside was just that: a belief. Not a prediction of roster moves, not a critique of Cleveland's quarterback room, not a demand for change. Garrett emphasized his respect for quarterbacks across the league and reiterated his trust in his own teammates. He reminded everyone that his job is to sack quarterbacks, not pick them. The locker room appreciated the directness. The coaching staff thanked him for taking the narrative off their shoulders, and teammates who were initially confused walked away satisfied. In the end, Garrett's comment became a fascinating off-season storyline, one that revealed how a single opinion from a superstar defender can influence league-wide discussion. It also highlighted the growing divide in how fans and analysts view the future of the quarterback position. But most importantly, the situation reaffirmed that Garrett remains one of the league's most respected voices. Someone whose evaluations matter, someone whose honesty resonates, and someone who, even unintentionally, can spark conversations big enough to shape the football landscape. As the dust settled, Garrett refocused on preparing for the upcoming season. Reporters moved on to new storylines. Fans kept debating Shedeur versus Gabriel, but the locker room was unified again, and the NFL was reminded that sometimes the biggest controversies are born from the simplest comments. Garrett had spoken, the league had reacted, and now football moves forward. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this full breakdown and want more deep-dive coverage of the biggest NFL stories, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Sideline Insider. Your support keeps these videos coming. We'll see you in the next one.
But if Stefanski commits to Shedeur as the starter moving forward, he's essentially admitting his previous evaluations and depth chart decisions were wrong from the beginning. He's acknowledging that the fourth-string quarterback who wasn't getting meaningful reps was actually better than everyone ahead of him the entire time. That's an incredibly difficult thing for any coach to admit, especially when their decision-making is already being questioned and job security is tenuous. The comparison between Shedeur Sanders and Dillon Gabriel is interesting because they represent two very different quarterback profiles with vastly different paths. Gabriel was drafted higher. He received all the first-team reps throughout training camp and the preseason. He was given every advantage and opportunity the organization could provide to establish himself as the franchise quarterback. But after watching the game film and seeing the plays Shedeur made in his debut, it's hard not to question what the Browns' coaching staff saw in Gabriel that made them so confident he was superior to Sanders. To be clear, Gabriel did nothing wrong to suffer that concussion. Critics will immediately claim the Raiders game was a fluke against a bad team and that he's not ready for the long grind of an NFL season. That game will be must-watch because it'll significantly impact Cleveland's quarterback situation and the direction of the franchise. Kevin Stefanski's careful avoidance of naming Shedeur as the starter moving forward speaks volumes about his mindset and approach. He praised Shedeur's performance after the game in safe, measured terms, but didn't commit to anything regarding the future or who'll start when Gabriel is healthy. That carefully calculated non-answer suggests he's trying to keep all his options open and avoid boxing himself into a corner before he's ready. But that kind of deliberate vagueness and hedging creates uncertainty, which can be toxic in a locker room. Players want to know who their quarterback is. They want to rally behind one guy, build chemistry and trust, and work on timing and rhythm. The wishy-washy approach of keeping everyone guessing doesn't benefit anyone and can create division when unity is most needed.
Round pick who was fourth string just weeks ago. If Shedeur Sanders becomes the genuine franchise quarterback his debut strongly suggests he could be, it would represent one of the greatest draft steals in NFL history. It would completely vindicate General Manager Andrew Berry's talent evaluation and his willingness to take Shedeur, despite all the skepticism and criticism. And it would finally end Cleveland's decades-long quarterback nightmare. But all of that tremendous potential can only be realized if the coaching staff and organization fully commit to Shedeur and provide him the support, resources, and opportunity he needs to develop. Jerking him in and out of the lineup based on politics rather than performance, creating unnecessary quarterback controversy through indecisiveness, failing to build the offense around his unique strengths and skill set, any of those approaches would stunt his development and potentially waste the